All right, welcome to I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House. My guest this evening, this is the first one we recorded at night. So my first guest this evening is one of my favorite comics and also a very good buddy of mine. And I will start off by saying this. When you are a comic and another comic, a headliner, takes you on the road, it's the greatest thing in the entire world. And my guest today is one of those people that has done that for me. We have been all over the country together. We have played with flamethrowers in Kansas. We have gotten free tattoos in Denver. And we were actually together when America started to shut down because we were in Nashville and Huntsville, Alabama, of all places, when the stay-at-home orders. So today, my guest is one of my very good buddies, Dan Cummins.
Hey, man. Thanks, Pat.
Dude, thank you for having me, man. Thank you for, I've asked you podcast questions before because, you have your podcast, which I did not include in your intro. My apologies. Time Suck and Scared to Death. Both great podcasts. But, when I got the ball or the idea rolling with this, you were the first person I reached out to. So thank you for answering all my questions and thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Pat, man. Thank you. No, that's crazy. That's right. We were together, in Huntsville. Man, I remember that so well. I know you've obviously done shows since, but that's the last time I was on stage for stand up. So
yep.
So weird. It's 7 months ago.
Man, and you still have not been on stage yet.
Nope.
Okay, because I remember I texted you or I called you. I don't remember. We talked. That was my last show as well, obviously. But then I did a bar show in Delaware because they opened up kind of quicker than other states in mid-July. So I had 4.5 months without doing it, but you're still rolling in the dark zone there.
Yeah, it's weird. I was talking to some other comics about it, and it's just the timing of when things went dark in my kind of material generation kind of a cycle is when I was really working on a lot of new stuff. And so, it was shaky in March in my mind. I mean, I was getting through the shows, but it took a lot of concentration, and I just know myself. And I know that if I just did a random set, I would 99% chance I would just come away infuriated. and so what I have told Lindsay is I just don't want to start, for me, I don't want to start doing it until I feel like I can do it a couple weekends a month and I can make progress. Because what I'm worried is that I'll do it, have a shitty set, then have to stew on it for 6 weeks, then have another shitty set, then have to stew on that for another 6 weeks, and I'll just be a mental case.
Yeah, so, and possibly a shitty city too, where you're not even getting a true reaction. Not, I shouldn't say that's mean to point on certain cities, but I know what you mean. Certain cities, you're going to have more fun than others. So,
right.
Well, not more fun, but certain cities lead themselves to better crowds.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So it's just obviously such a weird time for stand up. I just really threw myself heavy into podcasting and just, staying busy, partly just work, building the business. And also honestly, just a little bit of a distraction. Because if I'm just around thinking too much, then my mind starts to float on why isn't this over with? Why can't we do this? And I just get frustrated.
Yeah, I remember about a month or 2 months into quarantine, you and I talked on the phone for an hour, and we both had a pretty good vent session about just how, everything was still up in the air. We bitched about not doing stand-up and trying to write and trying to stay focused, but we couldn't. And I remember we were both just, trying to be optimistic, but we're we don't fucking know.
Yeah, it was so weird.
And still, that's true right now, today.
And what's so crazy is, for me, it's we had the whole tour lined out for all of 2020. And it was looking really good. It was the most fun, the most fun I've had on stage ever. The biggest kind of crowds I've ever had coming out. We were having a blast. We were adding shows and weekends. It was oh yeah, this is great. And then when it first went down, my agent was all right, we're just going to, hopefully they're, in 6 weeks, we'll be back up. There was a lot of optimism initially when we didn't know much. And I would have weekly meetings with Joe Eschenbach, awesome dude, been with him a long time. And, and he would just give me the scoop. He would have at UTA, they would have these constant meetings, daily meetings with the staff, the latest updates. And then after about 7 weeks, the tone started to change. And then it was and he's a really stoic dude. But then it started to be this tone of I don't fucking know, man. Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully August. Hopefully. And then it went from that to I think 2020 is kind of fucked. hopefully 2021. And now, like Live Nation, like their theater acts and stuff, they're just telling them not to plan on anything until the fall of 21, which is so crazy to me.
Fuck. Honestly, I didn't hear that till right now. Shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't look like, for those kind of venues, they just, because there's so much promotion that has to go into those and so much like lead time. And I get what they're worried about. It's the same thing as like the movie theaters. They don't want to like set a release date or set like a date for a show. And then you put all this money into promotion. And then, 2 days before, the governor, the mayor, the president, whomever says like, no, we got to shut it down again. The numbers are spiking, which I get. But then like those people don't get that promotion money back,
Yeah.
And that's happened to comics. Like, oh man, I was talking to Chad Daniels a while back. He got so lucky on a little mini tour he did.
He did. He did the whole Midwest. I saw that.
Yeah, he did the Midwest. And I don't know if he told you, but it's like 2 out of the 4 stops he did, the very next day after his show, they shut things down. And like if he would have been 1 day behind, his show would have been canceled at the very last minute. And I know other comics, couple hours before their show, they get canceled. It's just, I remember seeing a thing on the Comedy Store a while back. It was in LA. It was such a bummer. They were talking like they were shut down. Then they opened their bar, their outdoor bar, socially distanced outside. They were so happy to have something. And then they were literally a day away from their first show back after months of being shut down. And then that afternoon, the governor was like, nope, all nightclubs and bars back down. And so I'm like, I just can't imagine how depressed they were to be like, finally we're back. And then at the last second, nope, never mind.
I know. Well, that's crazy. But also, you and I, we did Huntsville, Alabama on a Sunday, but Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we were in Nashville, and everything was up in the air every single day. It was so bizarre because we didn't know. Was it Saturday? We didn't know if we were going to have the late show. Like things were still. Right. Remember, the green room had such an odd vibe, but we all went through with it, and then they closed after our shows, and then. They were one of the first clubs to reopen, and then D.L. Hughley passed out on stage.
Yep. and then they got shut down again.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest weekend because that was like mid-March. And I remember Lindsay and I got there on, I think, Wednesday because we had press Thursday morning. And then we weren't leaving until...
Yes, you stayed an extra day because Lindsay was texting me my travel schedule. She's like, "How's the airport? Are you on the plane? How's the airport look?" Like,
yep, that's right. We flew in on a Wednesday night, and we weren't flying back out until Tuesday because we were supposed to see this band that I'm now blanking on, the Revivalists. We were supposed to see the Revivalists in Nashville on the Monday after our Huntsville show, and so we kept our original flights. We did fly back on Tuesday, so we were at that hotel in Nashville. For Wednesday night through Tuesday morning. And it was so surreal to watch day after day, the amount of guests steadily dwindle and the staff steadily dwindle. And we would walk down to this Whole Foods down the street each day to get like some water, some other, hot food or whatever. And like by like Monday, it was a weird Walking Dead vibe, like this weird ghost town. Just no one was out. Nothing was happening. Half the places were closed. It was like some dystopian post-apocalyptic shit.
Oh, it was because this before our Saturday shows when like a lot of things really hit the fan in all of America that day.
Yeah,
I like a little bit of chaos. So I heard everything was shutting down. So I'm like, I'm going to Uber over to Broadway, which is the strip of Nashville where there's a million bars and honky tonks and the bachelorette parties and the trucks and live bands on the street. And it was a ghost town. And as scary as it was kind of cool.
Right. I mean, I will say, just trying to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess. At the very least, 2020 has been interesting. It's been very memorable. It's been the weirdest year of my life to live through.
Yes. And real quick, I want to get into our main topic here, but I will say this. Yeah. Do you think even though this year is fucked up, it's still flying by? Like days themselves might drag, but everything shut down in mid-March, and now it's almost mid-October, and I'm like, how? How has it been 8 months when we've done next to nothing this year?
Right.
Do you think it's still flying by, even though it's just been terrible?
kind of a weird both situation here where sometimes when I think about like Huntsville, I think like, holy shit, I can't believe that was that long ago. Then it seems like it was flying by. But then the day to day, I'm so used to, well, just like you are, of like going to the airport and bouncing around and like having this very varied schedule. And then this year, my studio that I work out of is like 3 blocks from my house. And most days I don't even leave my side of town. Like I haven't been to the airport since March. So it's just back and forth. And it's like a weird Groundhog's Day. And it seems like a super long year that way. Where
Yes.
I'm not used to having this repetitive schedule like this.
Yeah, repetitive schedule. That's absolutely right. Speaking of your airport, this is the great segue into our topic here. I flew over Coeur d'Alene like 48 hours ago. I flew home from Portland, and the pilot said we're going to go to Spokane over Coeur d'Alene and then down. And I was like, no shit.
That's awesome.
All right, so the whole crux of my podcast here is to find out my guests' comedic influences and when they decided they would get into comedy into their first set. So you started in a different part of the country than a lot of other people. So you grew up in Riggins, Idaho, a very small. It's not a city; it's a town, right?
Oh, tiny town, like just over 400 people.
Okay. Oh, so 400 people. Jesus Christ, my high school grade had 580.
It's so different, and it's isolated. That's what, like, sometimes there will be a little town that is 5 minutes away from a city, and it's like, okay, you kind of live in a little town. I mean, you do technically, but it's like Riggins is 400 people, and you have to drive on this windy highway road in the bottom of this deep canyon for 45 to 50 minutes over this, kind of decent, like little mountain to make it to a town of 3,500 people. And then you have to drive another hour to make it to a city of 30,000 people. And you have to drive another hour. Like you have to drive like over 3 hours in the other direction to make it to Boise. Like it's really isolated.
Jesus, yeah. I grew up immediately outside of Philadelphia, so like every suburb has like 20, 30,000 people, and then literally 15 minutes away is Philadelphia.
Right. And when you drive from suburb to suburb, like there's no like big stretch of just open rural land. It's just, it's like the sign changes and now you're in another town or another suburb. Yeah, where I grew up it's Idaho County is the least populated county in all of Idaho, which is one of the least populated states. I love it when people like
that's the saddest of the sad.
Right. It's very, very remote. About as remote as you can get and still live in a town.
All right. So Dan Cummins is a kid or teenager in a in a town of 400 people. Did you have any comedy influences as a child?
I mean, we had satellite TV, and that was like my link to the outside world. And I do remember a couple tapes got passed around when I was probably like 6th grade. And one was Andrew Dice Clay. Like I remember it wasn't even like the tape you bought from the store. It was somebody made a copy of that tape. And then it like got passed around. And it was all the hickory dickory dock. This bitch was stuck in my cock. Like all like the initial things.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably my first introduction actually to stand-up, was just hearing that. I didn't even think of it as stand-up. It was just like a dirty tape. And then
what a vulgar way to get your feet in the water.
Right.
Do you like comedy? Yeah, you cunt. Like,
right.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said the C word on my own podcast, but
no. That's that. But like, well, and then the other one was dirty too. It's like the first stand-up special I remember watching is Eddie Murphy Delirious, and I was captivated. I think I don't remember if it aired initially on HBO. I think it did. And I remember seeing that, and then my cousins, like we talked about it, and then I got the tape, and then I memorized it. So I was real into that. And then shortly after that in junior high, I feel like I'm dating myself. I think that Comedy Central was actually called the Comedy Channel at that time. And that's when it was kind of like early MTV was heavy on music and isn't anymore. Early Comedy Central was way heavier on film. And that's when I remember seeing, I don't even remember all the names, but like, oh man, Bob something. He had like the football helmet and he'd do all the characters.
Bob Nelson.
Bob Nelson, and
Epi Epperman. I can name his characters.
yes,
I've worked with him many times. Yeah.
oh, that's hilarious. And then it was like, Gallagher on Showtime and those kind of guys. And I thought it was funny, but I wasn't sucked into it. I mean, I would turn it on sometimes and watch a little bit, but there wasn't like growing up, there wasn't a comic I would like look out for. Other than Eddie Murphy, I did listen to that one album a bunch of times, but that was kind of it. And then I went to college, and stand up was not a thought. And I went to Spokane, Washington, about 3.5 hours from Riggins, and got immersed in the campus kind of life, and never thought about stand up. And I don't remember watching stand up at all when I was in college.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting point. So if it's not on the radar at all and you're in college, where did it come in?
It came in when I was a sophomore in college. There was a campus kind of SNL derivative show. It was like at the theater there at Gonzaga. It was called Waiting on FM, and it was the exact same format as Saturday Night Live. There was a band, there was a host, there was sketch comedy, and I watched it freshman year. Just thought it was super funny. It was kind of like the talk of campus, because it was like this Jesuit college. It was basically anything would go on these sketches. And so it was all inside jokes. It was sketches about things happening on campus that year, about interesting personalities, professors, whatever. And it was so funny to me. And
well, that's funny. That's very inside too. Like you already have a built-in audience. I did when I first started, and I went to Temple University. Like any shows I did in Philly or on campus, I had a lot of Temple stuff, and it was such an easy shoe-in. But you also don't know any better.
Right, totally.
It's all you know.
Yep, exactly. You're this little insular little world there, and I loved it because although I didn't watch stand up really much growing up, I did watch Saturday Night Live religiously for like 4 or 5 years of my childhood. I would watch it with random small town. I go to my grandma's house down the street. My grandma would read a book on the chair. I would watch Saturday Night Live, and that was like my Saturday night routine for a lot when I was a little kid. And I did love that, but I didn't think about it as a career. I just loved it. And then when I did that sketch show, I was like, oh man, no, I watched it. The next year I auditioned, had no idea if I would get in. I did get in, and I had the most fun I had probably ever had in my life, hanging out with the cast. A bunch of cute girls were in the show. I got a lot of attention from girls after the show. Like they thought it was funny. And I was like, oh, this is cool. But then I studied abroad the next year. And it's funny, I started playing guitar, and I did the total stereotypical thing of like, nah, I got to be serious about my music now. And I got really into like writing songs, really sappy songs. Came back the next year. They asked me to be part of the sketch show, and I was like, nah, I got to focus on my music. Like I literally did that. Like I was going to be some musician. Senior year, I decided to do it again, or maybe I'm flipping this. Anyway, I did it one more time. It was fun. And then graduated. Went, tried to find a job, didn't think about comedy anymore. And then I just kind of got depressed about, 6 months, 9 months after school. I didn't like my job. I was trying to do the social work thing. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like that. So I went and got a job at a gym. Thought that would be more fun, because at that time I liked to work out more. Didn't enjoy that as a job. And then my ex-wife, she was my fiance at the time. We were like college sweethearts. She heard on the radio a commercial for a comedy club that I didn't even know existed in town. And
in Spokane, we're talking about.
Spokane. Yeah, it was called Laughs, and it really wasn't even a comedy club. Like it was in this sports bar called the Season Ticket, which is no longer there. They had a corner of the inside of that building walled off with like some plywood. And it was probably like a little 100-seater, and they just called it a comedy club. And they would bring a guy from out of town to do to headline, do the hour, and they didn't have the money to bring in out-of-town feature acts or MCs. And they didn't have very many people doing stand-up locally. So there was like 8 people doing stand-up, and the crowds were sick of them when I happened to go to an open mic. So I did the open mic one time. A bunch of my college buddies came to watch me. It was fun because the crowd was stocked. They were like, oh man, you gotta come back. At the time I thought it was because I was funny. I'm sure they just wanted to sell more drinks. I come back the next weekend, do it again, and then immediately after my second open mic, they're like, "Do you want to host next weekend?" Man. Because there was no one. They just needed a fresh body on the stage.
I was just gonna say you were fresh blood.
Yep. And so you know, 2 weeks after my first open mic, I'm hosting, and then I'm doing like guest sets and different things. And I didn't know how bad I was. The other people locally were honestly pretty bad at that time, which made it way easier for me to get into it. The bar was so low. I didn't realize that at the time. And I just got really into it then. But it's like, yeah, it just kind of came out of nowhere. And then once I did it, I just liked it so much more than the job I was doing at the time. I just kind of went real heavy on trying to come up with new material. There was a lot of regulars, so I felt like pressure to say something new the next week.
Oh, God, yeah. That still never goes away either.
Right. Now you're just doing that. Yes, it is funny. Like earlier, like at the one club, and there's like Marv, the guy who's there every week, and you see his face, and you know he's going to sit in the second row every time, and you don't want him to hear the same jokes. And then it just becomes a different thing where when you like have fans and you're touring around, now you don't want the people and the staff at Nashville to hear the same jokes when you come back. Yep.
So real quick, I just want to interject on the fact that you started comedy in a scene that had about 8 people in a makeshift comedy club that had a repeat audience.
right, exactly.
That's unfathomable.
And there was
like those people either must have really loved shitty stand-up comedy or they had fucking nothing else going on.
Oh, there was no other option.
Or both.
I mean, I think when I started it, there was one other
place. No offense to the people that started before you.
Right. I think when I started, there was one other place in town, and they did Sunday nights, this place called Good Times, and it was a terrible show where the audience was basically encouraged to heckle the comics. It was terrible. And then I think that was it. And then kind of for the first few years I was around, there was this other weekend club that would pop up sometimes. But there really, like there wasn't a scene like there actually in Spokane now. There's a local comedy scene. When I started, there really wasn't.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, there's a local comedy scene. I know a couple of those comics, Ryan and Harry Riley.
Yeah, exactly.
Both funny guys.
Harry Riley, yep, exactly. And then Ryan McComb. But like when I started, there was these older guys who just did bar comedy in the area. They literally traded jokes. They would all have the same act, basically. There was those guys, and then there was a couple really green open micers, and then that was it. And then usually the really green people would fall away. Somebody new would pop in, but yeah, it never turned into a scene. And I left like 6-7 years later down to LA for a while. And in the time I was there, it never did develop into a scene. And then it just developed like the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh, very cool. All right, so you did 2 or so sets, and then you started hosting. How did that very first set go? Did you get laughs because you were fresh blood, or were they just happy to see a new face and they just laughed because they felt like they should?
It was so up and down. I actually don't remember my first host set. I remember my first open mic set.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I mean, like your very first open mic set.
Yeah, my first open mic set, yeah, it did go well because I was essentially doing like Gonzaga characters from sketch comedy on a stand-up stage and just playing to my friends. It was like, yeah, like inside jokes. All of my jokes were about things going on around there, if I remember right. And so it did well. And then when I went in front of a random audience, I ate shit.
Yeah. That's the most understood phrase in comedy. Ate shit, ate a dick. Like, exactly what you meant.
Yep.
Did Here Come the Spoons, motherfucker, start as a bit then, or did that just happen then and then come to fruition as you became a better comic?
It's funny that story, and then another story I had from college about the ants, about this ant infestation that I did on later. Those I tried to do both of those probably in the first 3 months of doing stand-up, but I had no idea how to tell a long story, and so
I still don't.
Yeah, I put them back, and then I probably brought back the spoon story about 7 or 8 years later, and then it came back. But yeah, but I had a lot of like bits that I tried in my first year of stand up that I just kept in a notebook. I couldn't figure out how to make it work, but I liked the concept, and then they would come out, years later.
Did you have any jokes in your first set there that were not like college related, like any like weird one-liners you remember, or anything to just get the crowd's attention?
Not initially. No, not when I first went. It was all like silly kind of character-based stuff.
Okay, so character-based stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
You said that. So is that when did you meet David Crow?
Oh, David Crow I met a year about a year after that. I started in like August of 2000. I remember like really early. I've been doing like 2 months, and I submitted already for some like Seattle comedy competition. Like it's insane looking back that I would.
That's one of the big. Well, I should say that was one of the big ones.
Yeah,
15 years ago, I guess.
Right. You know, they probably didn't even look at the tape. It was preposterous. I even sent one in, but I wanted to do it the next year. So I went and hosted at the Seattle Comedy Underground at the time. And that was my audition. They let me do the competition, and then I actually got second place. I made it all the way to the finals, got second place, partially because I was new. I think I didn't realize that some of my material wasn't good, and I sold it so well, like so heavily. But David Crow was a judge for the final. So in late 2001, he was one of the judges. He wanted to do sketch comedy at the time. He liked that I was doing the guitar on stage at that time, and he wanted to do this musical sketch comedy and stand-up kind of like variety show. And yeah, he just talked to me about it afterwards, and I started taking trips to Seattle and working on sketches. And yeah, we gave it a go for about, I don't know, year, 18 months.
Oh, that's so cool. Because just a little bit of backstory for anybody listening. I know, you and David Crow were very tight when you started. And I met David Crow because he was the comic on a cruise when I was on a family vacation. And then I told you that when we first met and started hanging out. Yep. And then you were like, we started together. And I was like, small world, man. Like, how is this comic on a cruise ship where I'm on a family vacation? Like the guy that started with my very good buddy. And none of us knew this. Like, it's the smallest comedy can be the smallest world.
It really, I remember I went on my first cruise just a couple of years ago for this Tom and Dan Mediocre Time podcast. Like I was like the guest of the podcast, brought out Lindsay. And I go to the exercise room, and then the comic on the ship is there. And I don't want to say his name because I don't have like glowing reviews. Nice enough guy, but like he was a dude I did these triple runs with when I like 3 years in. Like he was living in LA, I was in Spokane, he was the headliner, I was the opening act. And it was just so weird. I didn't even engage because I didn't want to start up a long conversation, you know.
And then just the awkward avenues that could take.
Yep. Because it'll be like, oh man, you know, hey, can you put in a word here? Or hey man, can you let's grab a drink? And I just didn't want any of that. But it is weird. Like I'll see comics, you know, or did when I was touring more. But like especially when I was living in LA at the airport all the time, it'd just be so weird. Or be on a flight with somebody, and you're like, oh man, I spent 2 weekends in Pennsylvania with that dude 8 years ago. You know, it's super weird way.
The whole idea of my podcast is pretty comedy inside. I get into people's, you know, like I said, early influences, your first set, yada, yada. Yeah. Could you explain? I know what it is, but can you explain to other people what a triple run is?
Oh yeah. A triple run. It's like, and I love that you knew what these were. Cause a lot of comics like east of the Mississippi.
I was offered to do one. Okay. But it was like, I think it was like in like the fall, and I was like, nah, I'm not risking it. Right. Yeah. But this is like 6, 7, 8. No, maybe 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of the ones I did were like in the, 2002, 3, 4, 5 kind of range. And they've been going for a long time before then. I think there's still some around, but for people who aren't big geography people, like, the Northwest is incredibly spread out. The West in general, the cities are much more spread out than they are on the East Coast. So like there'll be these one-nighter bookers, and they're on the East Coast and Midwest too, who will just line up these bar shows, and you'll do one in one town, one in another town. And you might do like, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, especially a long time ago, they had more of these shows. And you could do like 5, 6, sometimes 7 nights a week doing these shows.
But they could be like 8 hours apart each.
That's the thing. Like on the East Coast or some places in other parts of the country, you might only have a few hours to drive between each gig. But these triple runs got notorious because he booked Nevada and then and a lot of like the Northwest. And I remember it would be these insane drives where you would have like Wenatchee, Washington one night. And you might have to make it to Pocatello, Idaho the next night, and it would be a 10-hour drive.
Fuck.
And like all these crazy things. And then, in the winter, you'd have to go over mountain passes. I remember going over like these passes in Montana in a snowstorm. It's it's an 8-hour drive without bad weather. And you're just like white knuckle driving. I'm driving this little fucking Hyundai Elantra, and to pull into some Holiday Inn in Billings or something and perform for 8 people who don't give a fuck about comedy. Like, they were soul crushing gigs. But the good part, I just took this mentality with them early on, and I'm like, you know what? I'm like, all I have to do to get rebooked in this place is not be worse than a lot of the other people who have come through who would openly like shit on the gig on stage.
Absolutely.
So even if I'm not funny, as long as I'm nice to the people who work there, I try, and I'm not an asshole, I'll probably get booked back.
That is 80% of comedy.
Right.
So, like, I mean, triple run or not, if you're not a dick, you're probably going to come back.
Right.
And I don't even want to say you have to be funny, because I've seen a lot of not funny people come back.
Yep.
So don't be a dick, you will get the work again.
And I just treated them like, I was only getting $100 per gig, for these opening slots. And I just treated them like 30-minute open mics. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to use it as a chance to try and get better. And so I actually got a lot out of those triple runs.
That's very cool to hear, because like I said, I never did one, but I've done a lot of stuff like that throughout. Now you're talking about like, the Pacific Northwest, East Coast, but I've done stuff in the mountains in New York, through Pennsylvania, down into like a weird part of Virginia or West Virginia. And it's just different, but you take something with you, because you take a beating. I mean, you can also have great sets there, and you can sell merch to those people.
Yep.
A lot. You can make a lot more selling merch than you do in your paycheck from the club. But when you take those beatings in smaller towns, you come back to the bigger cities and the clubs and crush harder. Like, you learn so much more from those shitty, not necessarily shitty, smaller, less favorable gigs than you do when you're, just doing gigs in New York and then Philly and then San Fran and then LA. Now you're in front of all these big city crowds. You go out with sticks and make them laugh. Now you're working on something.
Right. Yeah. As long as you stick to your guns and try to do material that's true to you in those small places. I mean, I would see some guys in the one-nighters get stuck in them because they would do things that would work in front of audiences that weren't as sophisticated stand-up wise. And they would do like these street joke type stuff. I mean, really, I remember this one guy. I'll never forget. It was probably my third triple run. No, not even. Actually, no, it was my first triple run. That's right, because I was only doing 15 minutes. I wasn't even doing a half an hour. He was doing 75 minutes. I was doing 15.
That's even an odd format for a bar show.
Oh yeah, he was like a musical act. I was like a $50 set, and we had 4 or 5 nights together, and I bombed so hard every night. But like after the first 3 nights, he took me aside and he was like, "Hey man," he's like, I get it. You're trying to do, what you're doing. He goes, but start with something they like. He's like, what I like to do is start with the street joke that I know that they, that they're going to like, that they've probably heard something similar, and just do that. And then I watched his set, and it was nothing. There was no original material. It was just all this nonsense. And this was a guy who had been doing these one-nighters for 30 years.
That makes sense.
Yep. And I remember thinking, like, I would rather fucking bomb and not do comedy anymore than to do what he's doing.
Yes. So, there's something very cathartic in going down with the ship.
There is. Absolutely.
Because it's being true to you. Like, I mean, I've opened for so many people in those kind of rooms where it's like, sorry, so I'm talking about, I don't know, my parents getting older, or a heartbreak, or just anything real life that sucks and kind of hurts, and it'll like bomb, and then the headliner will be like, can you believe they have a Jenny Craig next to a Pizza Hut, and it fucking murders?
Right.
And it's soul crushing, because not only is that not funny and it sucks, like, you go back to your hotel room knowing they crushed with that shit, and you're sitting in your fucking 7x8 Holiday Inn room trying to spill your heart out to people and make a connection, and they think you're garbage.
Right. I will say, I learned early on, bombing, doing the material you really like to do, as painful as it is, does feel better than killing on material you hate. Because I learned
100%.
I'm not going to say who, but I was opening up for a guy who was doing pretty well, real well at this time. And his audience was very different than the kind of comedy that I like. And it was good money. I definitely liked the money. It was a cool experience overall, but my material just didn't fly. And I was so frustrated bombing in front of these big crowds. And I just thought, well, what if I just kind of tweak some things? And I just wrote some stuff. It was my stuff, but it wasn't really my voice. I wrote with his crowd in mind and thought what would work. And then I was right. And I went and did a set and it killed. And I felt like fucking garbage. Like
Yeah.
I went and it was like a terrible scene in a movie where you like the long shower, you're trying to wash it all away. and after that, I was like, you know what? Nope. I'll just keep doing my stuff. And if it works, it'll be awesome. If it doesn't, then I guess I'll find something else to do.
That's totally true. And so the club in Austin, Texas, Cap City, just closed recently, and I had that moment there. My first or second time there, I headlined the Wednesday show, and it didn't go that great, but I stuck to my guns, and I came off stage feeling way more victorious than bummed because, it wasn't a great crowd or a great show, but I stuck to my guns the entire time, and I survived, and there was still material I didn't do. So in my mind, that was way more of a win than something I should be, upset over.
Yeah, I remember, people have different philosophies on comedy. And I remember starting off, another one-nighter guy who told me, he's like, some people, what did he say? There's two types of comics. Some comics, they go to the room. Other comics try to bring the room to them, where it's like, and he talked about like the entertainer will sense what the crowd likes and just gravitate their act towards that particular show. And then there's another kind of comic that's like, no, I want you to laugh at what I like. And I always wanted to be like that kind, like, I want you to laugh at like what I'm trying to do, because I don't know, like otherwise it's just
because you're the comic on stage and you want to say your point of view and they don't have to like it, but you want to make them like you and bring them in. So it only makes sense that you shift it to where they can come to you.
But some of these comics, like they, oh man, I keep losing this this thought.
Oh,
but,
sorry. I probably derailed you 10 times.
No, you're helping. Actually. No, it's me, but it's like, I don't know. I just like early on, I was like, oh, that's what it was. This comic who thought that like, you should go to the crowd sometimes. He had this belief that I was like, a really good comic can kill in front of any audience. And that never set right with me because a lot of the comics I liked, and I would think of like at the time, Mitch Hedberg, he bombed before he became, at the end of his career, a little more known all the time because he wasn't everyone's cup of tea. And if he would have bent and changed and tried to form himself to each crowd, then he would have never been the person so many people love today.
Yeah, that voice that we love at this point, love from him.
Right, exactly. And so that really, I thought about that a lot early on, where I'm like, I want to be somebody who doesn't have to be for everybody. Like I don't need to be the entertainer that has to please a wide variety of audiences. Like I'm fine with a lot of people not thinking I'm funny. I just want to find the other rooms where there's people there that do.
Yeah. So I remember being early in my career. We're talking like between a year or two, and I'm inexperienced. I've mostly done open mics, maybe a paid bar gig or two where I get $20 or chicken fingers or something. But I remember an elder comic in Philly who'd been around since like the 70s telling me it's never the crowd's fault. And I was a year or two into comedy. I'm like, nah, it can be. like that may be an old school mentality, but that, and I've heard other people say it since then, but it's never the crowd's fault is horseshit. Sometimes it is the crowd's fault.
Absolutely. Like, I've had sets where I walk off being so frustrated with myself because I know that I did a shitty set, even though I had a really good set with the audience, like as far as reaction, because they were just such a hot crowd. And I've had those sets where I walk off thinking like I didn't deserve the laughs they gave me. Like I fucked up this, I messed up this line, I was sloppy here, my timing was off. And I'm like, man, they were a really generous audience. And then I've had other sets where I'm like, no, you guys fucked up. My timing was on. I don't know what was going on with you guys, but like it wasn't me that night.
All right, I'm going to bring up a very specific thing here, and I hope you don't mind because you and I have talked about this several times. Albany 2 years ago.
Oh yeah,
it was a Sunday show in Albany. It was
Yep.
a pretty good sized crowd. Like we're talking, I don't know, 140, 170 in that range. I would say I bombed opening for you. I did 25 and I did not care for them at all.
Yeah.
And I was doing stuff that was hitting hard at the time and was crushing every other week. So I had this hanging over my head. So then I bring you on, and then they weren't exactly uproarious for you either.
I didn't do well either.
And that was strange. But afterwards, they were the most complimentary crowd and brought so much shit. And it's like, well, you could have vocalized it. You could have just vocalized it, because I vividly remember opening for you and having back sweat like 7 minutes in. And I was pulling out the fucking works.
It's all a numbers game on that stuff, where it's like, you know, some people are internalizers, some people are externalize their laughter. Like I'm somebody who a lot of times doesn't really laugh out, you know, that loud when I'm watching something. And I feel
and
like
likewise, but we're also like desensitized to that.
Sure. You know, but I feel like sometimes with an audience, it's like you need like the right table or couple of tables that have that really like good laughter energy to kind of break up the audience, like get them kind of into it, and then it can change the whole group mentality of the room.
Yes, it spreads.
Yeah, it does. But if you don't have that, or little things, sometimes I think it's the club's fault. Sometimes the club, they'll have the lights on too bright. They'll have the audience, if it's not a full room, spaced out, you know, incorrectly. Sometimes the structure is shit, where the ceiling's really high, and so the laughter goes away. I mean, sometimes I'm amazed where certain clubs where I'm like, how did somebody think this was a good fucking idea? Like, how is this person who's been in comedy for 20 years, why would they design this club this horribly for the actual show?
And does every other comic complain about it every single week?
Right. And sometimes you do find out that, you know, I don't even want to like name certain clubs right now, but there's certain clubs where it's like, what the fuck? Like, why is it built that way? It's just like a terrible sound system. And sometimes it's a newer club. Terrible sound system, high ceilings, the lights are too bright, and you're like, yeah, it's always weird there. Like it's
keep that in mind, listener. It's not always the comic.
And you see like big acts. I think that's what some people will think that aren't as into comedy. They'll be like, yeah, but fucking Chris Rock though, he would fucking destroy there, and he would. It's like, yeah, most of the time, but not always. You know, it's like when you in LA or New York, especially before those people are names, there's always stories where it's like they were just as funny. I think about this actually with Ron White. I love Ron White.
Hell yeah.
I think he's a great storyteller. And I remember watching him for the first time. I was actually opening up for him. I had the same manager for a little while, and I was blown away with him doing this encore where he did the tater salad encore. And it was like like Led Zeppelin doing Stairway to Heaven. It was like the crowd went bananas. And I had never seen someone kill that hard. And he killed for like the hour before that. And I just remember talking to my manager afterwards. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, that's what I want to be someday. I cannot believe how much he destroys. And then he told me this story. He had represented him for a while, and he wasn't that prolific for a while. Like he kind of gotten stagnant in the clubs before he released the Blue Collar Comedy Tour material.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd been doing the same set for a while. So this guy, John, had seen that set in like Omaha at like the Funny Bone and these clubs, and then also watched it in these big theaters. And he said it was interesting from him. It's like when people didn't know he was famous, when he didn't have that kind of fan base, he was doing the same act, same timing, and he would bomb sometimes. And no one gave a shit. No one was saying he was a genius. No one was saying he was amazing. And then it all changed when he got his fan base. So even the good ones, even the best ones, listener, sometimes eat a fucking dick.
Bill Maher, there's a book called Comic Insights, which is to this day like my comedy Bible. Bill Maher did the same hour for a decade.
Wow.
A fucking decade.
Wow.
But I mean, he wasn't known yet. He was working. Exactly. But I mean, that's just what he had to do.
Right. To keep getting booked, you know? Yeah. You got to do your best stuff if you don't have a following to keep getting brought back.
I'm glad you mentioned the Ron White encore, because I cannot, I'd be remiss to say that I did your first encore in Dallas.
Oh yeah. That's right.
2 years ago.
That was amazing.
That to this day was probably in my top 5 favorite shows of all time
That was
because, and this is where my comedy autism comes in. Remember, you and I were listening to a lot of that John Lennon tribute album that week. We were on the road for 9 days straight. We were like 8 cities in 9 days or something crazy like that. 8 cities, 8 days, whatever. And we were listening to the John Lennon tribute album where a bunch of different artists covered John Lennon songs. And we were talking about how much we like Queens of the Stone Age.
Yep.
And so we get to Dallas, and there's no music being played in the theater. We're expecting I don't know, 500 or 600. And then you and I are sitting upstairs in the green room, and the showrunner comes in, and I think you suggested music. That's what it is. You suggested music, and then I suggested Queens of the Stone Age, and you said, yeah. Yep. About a minute or two later, music starts pumping through, and it's Queens, and the crowd starts cheering.
Yes,
before the show even started, and it changed the room. And I remember I did 20, 25 opening for you, and it crushed. Like, it was one of my favorite sets. They were hanging on to every word. They got the little nuances. It was one of the best sets I've ever had. And then you told me you were going to do like an hour, and then you were already at like 75 and not even into your closer yet. Or something like crazy like that.
Yep.
So then we did the encore. You came off stage, and I went back on stage and said, you guys are a great crowd. I made it seem like the show was over for a second, and I was like, are you guys ready for a little bit more Dan? And they went fucking bananas. And then
and that was so much fun.
I think you closed on Spoons.
Yep, I did. And
God, man. Yeah, that was the first encore I was a part of as well.
Yeah, that was my first theater encore. Yeah, that was because I remember thinking like, man, that would be nice to do more of that.
Oh man, and it was.
Yep. So much fun, man. So much fun.
All right, man. Well, that's my favorite memory of working on the road with you. I think kind of hard to go past it on that one.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite too, of like you and I together. I mean, that was such a special week. Doing one night in different places. That was the first time I'd really done that in that way, where it was fans coming out. We had so much fun. We had a Charlotte that week. Also was a really fun show, if I'm remembering that week correctly.
It started in Charlotte.
Yep, that was.
Then we went down to Atlanta.
Yeah, that was a blast, man. That little
then Birmingham.
That was less of a blast, but still fun.
That was my least favorite show of that run.
Yep.
They weren't bad.
Nope.
But they weren't they weren't good.
Yeah, that was the smallest crowd of the run. Yeah.
That's where the guy in the lizard suit and the spacesuit were in the front row.
That's right. That made it very memorable. That was my favorite part of that.
I would agree with that. And then we went up to Huntsville and then Nashville from there, and then flew over to Texas for Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio.
Yep. God, man, too much fun.
So much fun. All right, man. So your latest special is called Get Out of Here, Devil, and that is on
Amazon.
I was going to say Amazon, but I wasn't quite sure, and I didn't want to plug the wrong thing, so that's where I let you chime in. Yeah. And you have, 5 or 6 albums on iTunes and Spotify and all that jazz?
Yeah, I think 6. That sounds right.
6?
Yep.
All right, my apologies there. Sorry, I'm still hovering at 2, so my apologies. Dude, thank you for being here, man. You've been one of the best people in comedy to me, and I look forward to hitting the road again in 2021. Is there anything out there you want to say besides your own podcast, Time Suck and Scared to Death?
No, man, that's it. Hopefully people can watch the special, and hopefully you and I will be touring again together in 2021, man.
Sounds good, man.
2020 behind us.
Oh, dude, fucking A, right? All right. Dan Cummins, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Pat. Love you, man.
Love you too, buddy. I'll see you soon.